Hi everyone, Unnerved here, back with another deck tech video. This week I'm showcasing the Phasma Guavian Trooper deck. I've seen it called Guavian Smoothie. Shout out to the Discord Knights of Ren channel. There's a gentleman there that was building this deck, and ultimately uh, he called it Guava Smoothie. I like the name. Didn't follow his deck list. I actually really didn't look at it. I just liked the name of the deck. And so this deck features Captain Phasma, who is obviously well aware of us from Awakenings. She's 12 points or 15 points elite. We are playing her in elite form. She's got a 1 and 2 damage side, a focus side, a discard side, and a resource side. I'm then playing her with a First Order Stormtrooper, which is 1 range, 2 range, 2 range for a money and a resource side, and double blank. We all know Stormtroopers can't hit anything. And then we have the Guavian Enforcer, who is 1 range, 2 range, plus 1 range, plus 1 resource, plus 1 resource, and a blank, with an action that says remove this die to remove 1 shield from a character. That's pretty incredible. That's a really good ability, very useful in some situations. For sure, like if somebody's shielding up, just taking away, that's like doing a point of damage every turn if they're shielding up. Phasma's ability says all non-unique characters have the Guardian keyword, so that gives both First Order Trooper and the Guavian Enforcer Guardian. Now, the battlefield for a choice of this particular deck, I use Otogunga on Naboo, which is heal 1 damage from a character. The idea behind this is that if my character, like a First Order Stormtrooper or Guavian Enforcer, takes damage and I can claim the battlefield, I only heal 1 back. Many of my opponents don't want to select this battlefield because it doesn't just give them that much advantage. And eventually, this deck is going to put out a ton of power. It's not particularly strong in the early game. The early game, it takes time to set the dice up. You're just going to spend resources controlling your opponent's board state, and you really want to push the game long. The longer you push the game and the longer your First Order Stormtrooper and Guavian Enforcer can remain up, the better. And I think that it's something to look at. So let's start with the upgrade suite. I have a single Commanding Presence. Commanding Presence is a really good upgrade here, 3-cost upgrade. It has to go either on the First Order Stormtrooper, which you don't want to put it there, or it has to go on Phasma. This is an incredible tool for the mirror match with 9s. This is also an incredible tool for when you're not up against a red character list. The ability for you to take your red die and increase its value by 2 really means that Phasma's 2 side can turn to 4, her 1 side turns to 3, her discard side is 3 discard, which is incredible. Her resource side can be 3 resources, so you can really find Commanding Presence really up the ante. The only reason why I don't run 2 in the deck is because Phasma is always going to be the target of your opponents. They're going to do everything they can to get Phasma down over your Guardian units. And that makes sense because the individual First Order Stormtrooper and the Guavian Enforcer, they're good, but they're not anywhere near the dice power that Phasma is. Now, everything from here is trying to keep the upgrades fairly reasonably priced. We want to keep the cost of this deck down because it doesn't make a lot of resources. It can, but it doesn't typically. And so you're usually going to be working with 2 resources a turn, and because of that, you need to be able to play as much stuff as possible. So the DH-17 Blaster Pistol is a great add-on. I don't have any issue with putting DH-17s on First Order Troopers or Guavian Enforcers. It helps me be able to get my redeploy weapons out in a later turn for less resources, which keeps me resource efficient. And it has good damage sides. It's got a 50% chance to roll damage. It's got a non-modified side with the 1 and the 2 for a resource. But it goes back to, again, you really don't want that 2 for a resource to come up, because if it does, you're going to have to spend money to resolve it, and that's tough. The +2 side is there. It's also got a single shield, and I have no issue with this die rolling shields and taking the shield in this deck. The DT-29 blaster pistol is a 2-cost rare. It's got 50% damage sides as well. It's got a 1 range, +2 range, +2 range, a shield. Again, back to if we roll shield, I have no issue with that. It's got the ability to remove an opponent's die showing resource cost. What I like about this particular card in this particular meta is that there are a lot of units that have big damage potential that cost resources. Vader's 3 damage output costs resources. You've got FN with his 2 melee side costs resources. Chewbacca's 2 melee side costs resources. There's a number of characters in Star Wars Destiny that have big damage, but they require resources to make those happen. And this is a great way to kind of control that dice. It's another element of the control. I would call this deck at its heart a mid-range aggro control list, very much similar to my Fat Bucket in that regard, which is I want to get a little bit of damage in the early turns, but I'm not trying to be the blowout of, oh, I'm going to deal 9 damage turn 1. I'm not going for the glass cannon build. Instead, I'm going for a very tanky, very much set up and hold the line kind of build. Maybe that should be the name of the deck, hold the line. I am playing one F11D rifle. I know there's a lot of debate on this. This rifle has a 2 range for a resource, a +1 range, a +2 range, a resource side, and a special side. I know there's a lot of debate on F11D versus the holdout blaster, or at least there has been in the past. In my opinion, holdout blaster is just better than F11D because you get ambush and you actually have better sides. So I'm running 2 holdout blasters instead because I get the one for a non-resource cost, 2 for a resource cost, and a +2. So I'm very close to getting what the F11D is providing. The numbers are exactly the same. The difference being is that there is a chance the holdout blaster can roll without a resource cost, which is huge. Now there is a shield here, which I like, which you don't get on the F11D. The F11D nets you a resource, and there is some synergy with some other cards in this deck when you look at the resource sides. But you still have a resource side on the holdout blaster, and so the sacrificing of the special means that I still get synergy with the resource side there. I'm running 2 hunker downs in the deck. I think that they're great on the First Order Trooper and the Guavian Enforcer. Your opponent is very unlikely to want to force melee damage, especially unblockable melee damage from vibro knives and things like that, into First Orders and Guavians. And the ability to soak 1 damage, regardless of melee type or not, from a shield is really powerful. For a 0-cost event, I think it's an excellent choice here. Imperial Discipline is where the money is in this deck. You want to have Imperial Discipline in your opening hand. Having Imperial Discipline, it's going to go to Phasma, and then what you're going to be able to get out of it is consistent damage output. Why? Because number one, it's got a +1 range side. The +1 melee side we're not caring about. The shield side's also good, but we've got the 1 and the +1 resource side, and so those can be bait and switch fodder for this particular card, which is not the best for it, but those are just good sides to go, okay, well, I'm going to pull it down and I'm going to turn a Phasma die to a 2 damage. Or if you want to be really tricky about it, you can turn a Phasma side to 1 resource, and your opponent may go, why? And then you can bait and switch that resource and resolve the Phasma without risk of deflect and things like that. However, I usually look at bait and switches like if I've got a bunch of modified sides showing, my opponent thinks they're safe, I can bait and switch the resource and push out, 4 to 6 damage through the bait and switch play. I have a single copy of Rocket Launcher. I like Rocket Launcher in this deck a lot. What I find is the game goes on, you need something to enable the modified sides of the First Order Trooper and the Guavian Enforcer. I have no issue with Rocket Launcher going down on Guavian. I think it's actually a pretty good place for it because if the Guavian doesn't support the launcher, he's still going to consistently on rollout do 3 to 4 damage, and at the very minimum 2, right? If you get the special side, and then you can still remove shields with the Guavian, which helps you get extra power there. All right. So then I do include 2 copies of backup muscle. This deck is about pushing that damage down, and I found that in a lot of testing, there was other cards that I thought about playing here that might be good, salvage stand, for example. But ultimately, what I felt like was there are just times when this deck is just missing that one extra point of damage to finish um, a character off, and backup muscle really pushes that ability to do that, and it puts characters on the clock, so it's pretty effective at it. The event suite is a little bit consistent. So what we have here is we have a single copy of All In. I like this for when you've got Guavian and First Order out in the field. They're showing some damage, or maybe they're not, but they're showing some level of something that you want to use, and you're trying to get the battlefield back here. And so what you're going to do is you're going to focus. You're going to hope for a Phasma focus, and then when Phasma focuses, you're able to go all in and flip some sides around and really make some damage with a single all in. However, because she's only a single focus and she's a big enabler of your damage output, using her die, is something where you minimize your total maximum damage output because Phasma's no longer in the pool to use it. So this is why it's only a one of in this deck and not a two of. There's really just not a good support side upgrade that I wanted to use in this deck to help make all in better. It's just going to be situationally good, and there are times when you're probably just going to chuck it to reroll dice. Okay, so then I go to bait and switch. Now, bait and switch here is absolute money in this deck, and there are many reasons for it. But when you look at Phasma's dice, you can essentially assume that with her resource side rolling, there's a 50% chance of Phasma rolling damage if you have bait and switch. When you look at the First Order Stormtrooper, there is 4 of 6 sides. Excuse me. 4 of 6 sides of First Order Stormtrooper can roll damage because of bait and switch. Guavian Enforcer, 5 of 6 sides can roll damage because of bait and switch. All of those are very powerful reasons to have bait and switch in this deck. And so bait and switch to me is you have to have this deck equipped with bait and switch. It is just an automatic include. The ambush makes it too good to not have it, and it's just really solid. Cannon fodder. You could also take this and keep in mind, like if you think you can push more damage, like based on how your dice are laid out, if you have a resource side on Phasma and you've got some other damage showing on the board, you it may not be better to move Phasma to the 2. Like if you could move Phasma to the focus side and then ambush to change a rocket launcher to a 4 side or something like that, you might come out better that way too. But I think it's just better to get the damage out as much as you can when you're using bait and switch and not leave the dice in the pool for your opponent to play with. This speeds up the tempo of the deck a lot and helps us get back to claiming the battlefield. I run 2 copies of Cannon Fodder. Cannon Fodder is just Guardian in a tactic or an event, excuse me. And so like it's really easy. Like you're going to be using this on your First Order Trooper, but I'm also not afraid like if it looks like my opponent's going to deal 4 or 5 damage to Phasma. Like if I just cannon fodder to get rid of the black side and leave them with just modified sides, Phasma is only taking 3, so that's a win. So this is a very awareness type of card and how to leverage it and use it best. It's also not bad if your First Order Trooper sitting on 6 and they roll out a 3, you can cannon fodder it into your trooper, and it really mitigates the amount of damage that that character can do for that turn. We're running a single copy of Confiscation. This is a great card for Vibroknife. This is a great card for Holocrons. This is a great card for any really of the 2 costing upgrades that it can hit. Um, it's possible that Confiscation could be a 2 of in this deck. It really can be used as a form of dice control. Using your resources as the dice control element is not terrible with this deck. Where again you want to be playing long. So Confiscation could go to a 2, but I find it's only good maybe once in a game, and there may be a second time where you might go, boy, I wish I had that. I'm running 2 doubts in this deck. This is just phenomenal for when your opponent rolls that kind of uh, best side of a die. I don't recommend using doubt if your opponent's getting like the middling part of the die, and what I mean by middling is if you've got a Vader and he rolls the one range, the last thing you're going to want to do is have Vader re-roll that one range and end up hitting the 3 or the special. So you're going to save it for that 3 or the special, and you're going to, you have a 60% chance that that Vader die is going to come up worse than it did before in that scenario. So I use Doubt for controlling dice like that. It works pretty good with Poe in particular, who, if he rolls a special and can't resolve it right away, you can doubt the special. My opinion on Poe is that he's going to output 3 a turn. So his special is going to basically net you 3. It has some blowout turns where you get 4 from rocket launchers and Millennium Falcons onto an individual character. Obviously, when you talk about thermal detonators, it's even worse. It does go up to 6. And so, to me, Doubt is that card that if it gives you an opportunity to react to a Poe die and possibly get it off the board, that means that your opponent has one less post special for the turn, and you have a very, very good chance of slowing the deck down enough to win the game. Flank is in there for this exact same reason. This deck isn't going to roll fast. We want our opponent, we're going to kind of muddle around for a while, and we want our opponent to have to roll his characters or her characters. And when they do that, we want to take away their damage sides. Don't be afraid to flank a Vibro Knife, even if it's showing the +2, because that takes away the unblockable nature. And with the shield side of this deck, that means that they've got to fight through your shield still, which a lot of the Vibro Knife players aren't running Intimidates anymore. They're not running anything that really strips shields, because why would they? They can just bypass shields with Vibro Knife. But if you flank Vibro Knife, you take it away, it's they're just going to be done. They're just going to be done, and it's much better play than having a Guardian the Vibro Knife. So I like using flanks early if I have them, and then I like using the Guardian late when I don't. So I love flank in this deck. He Doesn't Like You is another card that once I get in there, First Order Trooper likes to roll blanks a lot. And instead of trying to fiddle around with a bunch of re-rolls trying to get First Order Trooper to roll some damage, it's just a good dice removal card. And I'll use this very proactively, because in this day and age of action cheating, like even if my opponent's not showing something scary, it's too easy to turn it into something scary. And so I will proactively remove Poe dice with He Doesn't Like You. I will proactively remove Vader dice that aren't showing anything, just to avoid the potential chance that it could go big. And then I've got 2 Tactical Masteries. Tactical Mastery is another card that can do some really powerful things. Number one, your opponent rolls out. He's got 2 damage showing. You can't normally mitigate 2 damage in decks or 2 different dice in decks, because that's just not possible. Tactical Mastery allows you to 100% do that. You spend 1 resource, you double Guardian, you take away both damage, and your opponent's left with no damage output. And there's a lot of decks in this meta right now that are relying on 2 damage to really put or 2 dice to really put the damage out. They may end up with a bunch of upgrades, but if you look at like the Vader Raiders and the Poe Mazes and some of these top tier aggro decks, the FN decks that are out there, there are very few cards that there are very few combos out there right now that aren't really relying on 1 or 2 character die to make things happen. And so Tactical Mastery really enables this deck to control that dice state. And then finally, if you got no other solution, nothing else you can do, this is one of the ways that you can potentially take a powerful die off of the side you want, and with the ambush action give you the ability still to react to it. So this deck requires a ton of situational awareness. It can be easily played wrong, and when it is marginally less good. So it's something that practice would be a part of this deck to make it run better. All right, so let's talk about card costs in the deck. We're running 13 0-cost cards. This is all about being able to play without resources, because this deck likes to be resource starved. We then have 11 1-costing cards. It goes back to, again, if I got to spend on an upgrade or I got to spend on resolving a modified side of a die, this is the only way I'm going to still be able to play cards, is have a bunch of 1-costing cards. Finally, we have 4 two-costing cards. So those cards are ideally played as upgrades on top of our one-costing cards, but there are a couple of two-costing cards that may be good enough just to put down straight up. And then finally, we have 2 three-costing cards in the deck. So the cost curve is very low for this deck. It doesn't need a lot of upgrades on the field to win. The base dice values of the characters are solid. And so outside of playing blue villain, where isolations are going to be particularly troublesome, and the fact that first order kind of enables feel your anger at times, most of the other matchups you're going to find that you can just out control your opponent considerably. And so then just through the healing process and playing the game long, you can work your way up to a first character kill in round 3, um, and possibly round 2 if you roll strong enough, but that requires a little bit of luck. And you're going to consistently kill a character round 3, and once one character goes down, the ability for you to control the final character on the board in such a way is just going to really give you significant advantage. But once we get a character down, we want Guavian hitting with rocket launchers if Phasma's near death. If Phasma's not near death, load Phasma up because she's just that good. But if Phasma is going to be near death, I mean, 3-4 rounds in, she's still alive at 3-4 rounds in. You're in a good place. But she's going to be near death. Your trooper's probably dead. Your enforcer's probably taking a little damage. You need to get damage out on the threat that's going to stay on the board the longest, and that would be the enforcer at that point. If Phasma's down at 8 health, or taking 8 damage, has three health remaining, it's very unlikely your opponent's going to focus any attention on doing 7 damage to the enforcer in one turn. It is possible, right? Like it is possible they could roll out enough damage to kill the enforcer and go, okay, well that's what we're going to do. But that's where tactical mastery can come in and save you. And that's just part of how the deck operates. We're going to do a couple of quick hands just to kind of give you some sample hands. So I'm going to draw 5 cards here. All right, this is a pretty good opening hand. Probably don't want the all in because I'm looking for bigger plays out of that than anything. I probably won't keep the F11. I can look at this hand and go, I could play DH17. I have a flank for removal and backup muscle still there. If I roll a resource, I can get it out on the battlefield. All right, so if again, the mulligan system here is not super good, so it doesn't reshuffle cards back in, so you don't really know what you would redraw. But in this case, it looks like cannon fodders. All right, so now we're going to redo this again. All right, this is kind of an ideal hand in some ways. We don't want the rocket launcher. I like all of the control elements. We'll keep the backup muscle. We'll just draw 1. We get double backup muscle. The beauty of this is we have nothing here and nothing here outside of the first order trooper that costs any money. So what we can do is we can kind of slow play here a little bit. We can play a backup muscle. We have 1 resource remaining. Our opponent can roll some damage. We roll the trooper in first. As long as he doesn't roll that 2 for a money, we are in really good shape. So, because now I have cannon fodder still to put more damage into the trooper. I have he doesn't like you if the trooper rolls just plain bad. I've got, the bait and switch still in my pocket, and I can still play another backup muscle, and that's pretty significant. All right. Third hand. All right, we got Imperial Discipline. That's what we really want in an opening hand here. We want Imperial Discipline. This is the card that I try to mulligan for a lot. But I also recognize that there are good cards in this deck that don't require Imperial Discipline to function. But getting Imperial Discipline turn 1 is a really nice feature. And so I probably ditch the Holdout Blaster because I'm not going to get to play it. I might hold on to a Confiscation if I'm playing Blue Villain. If I'm not playing Blue Villain, I'll probably mulligan it at this point, and I'll leave the Unpredictable in the bait and switch, and I'll get 2 new cards. All right, so we can actually play 2 upgrades this turn, which works out really, really well for us. And probably what I would do in this case is I would play a DH17 on the first order stormtrooper. I'd play Imperial Discipline on Phasma, but I'd probably wait till I roll the trooper in just to see what I get out of him. Then I'd play the Discipline if I can. And then from there, I would roll Phasma, and I can use bait and switch to make some advantages and unpredictable to control an opponent's dice this turn. All right. Heavy control hand here. I don't think I want to. He doesn't like use to start. I think we'll probably actually chuck the backup muscle in this particular hand and we'll get rid of that too. We just really don't have uh, good things going for us there. So we would draw 3 back up. We get a holdout blaster. In this case, this is maybe your best card to play this turn, but I would wait and see. If I can get a resource, then I can still use flank. So like I'd probably roll Phasma here and roll her first. And I tend to roll Phasma first in this deck anyways. And if Phasma nets a resource, I'd probably just pull the resource off Phasma. That way I could hold out Blaster into the First Order Stormtrooper, still have a resource for flank or backup muscle, and then I still have 2 control suite options with He Doesn't Like You and Doubt for the turn. All right, so that kind of gives you an idea of how this deck operates. I hope it's a deck that you'll consider trying out. I'd love to get your feedback on this deck. I always am interested in hearing your thoughts on it. If you think there's a card that I absolutely missed, let me know in the comments below. If you like what I'm doing, hit that subscribe button. It keeps you up to date on all my videos. Be sure to hit the little bell notification icon now. YouTube changed that a little while back, and you won't get notified when I upload new videos, even if you subscribe to my channel, unless you're getting notifications. All right, Thanks so much, everyone. I really appreciate you following my content. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon with another video with gameplay.